Hi guys, welcome back to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Max.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Just the two of us today, as
Indeed it is.
Daz is just landed back now, so we're not gonna rush him back to work straight away.
Yeah, he needs time to recover from his holiday.
Yeah.
From his relaxing holiday. He needs time to relax from his relaxing holiday.
Yeah,
So-
poor sod, you know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
So
Great life.
I saw a lot of people. I put out a community message asking for what people want to see, and you guys have done Mr. Ballin before.
We have indeed.
I've not heard of him. I didn't realise he had 9.5 mil subscribers.
Wow.
And you go,
You've not heard of him either?
No, I've not heard of him.
Well, I'm surprised at that. Yeah.
I think it's more. It's weird because the YouTube I watch is like very different to what this is. So I'm sure.
I guess, yeah,
it's
I guess
the
so,
pockets of it
yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we have done some stuff before. We've reacted to Mr. Ballin before. It's been really,
Yeah.
really good. I think you just alluding before that some of his videos are like pretty long though. So
yeah, I looked on it, and this
it's
was
a
the
bit
other
more
one below
difficult to do
25
sometimes.
minutes.
Yeah. So
I thought we'll give it a go. I've not seen it.
yeah,
I'm always excited to see something new, and yeah, we'll see it again.
That-
Bring it back to the channel.
why not? Yeah, let's give it a go then.
Let's give it a go.
In November of 2016, a professor was sitting outside in his backyard during a torrential thunderstorm. The sky was black, rain and hail were falling everywhere, and all around him, all he could hear were countless sirens. The city was in the middle of a full-scale disaster. But this professor was not actually shocked, because the day before, he had predicted this, and he had tried to warn people, but his warning had not worked. And now, people were dying in the exact way he knew they would. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please buy the like button, a gift certificate to a massage parlor, but before they go in, make sure to replace all the massage oils with honey and fire ants. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. At 5:30 p.m. on November 21st, 2016, Jodie Santoro, who was a 21-year-old mother in Melbourne, Australia, woke up to the sound of her 4-month-old son crying. Outside, there was this horrible thunderstorm going on. All this rain and hail were pelting the roof, and the wind was so strong that all the windows in the house were rattling. Jodie reached over and grabbed her phone on the nightstand and checked the time, and she saw right away that she had overslept. However, it had been a really hot day that day, and she was so drained from the heat and also taking care of a 4-month-old that she wasn't really surprised she had overslept. But as the sound of her son's cries intensified, Jodie knew, no matter how tired she was, she needed to get up and go tend to him. But the instant her legs swung off the bed and she actually tried to stand up, she knew something was wrong, and it had nothing to do with being tired. She had this incredible sense of dizziness come over her, and then her chest suddenly tightened up to the point where she could barely even breathe in. She found herself grabbing the bed just to steady herself. However, as alarming as this was, Jodie didn't panic. She knew this feeling. She had been dealing with asthma for years, and she knew this was the start of an asthma attack. And so Jodie reached over for her inhaler on the nightstand. She picked it up, brought it to her lips, pressed it down, and then took in a measured breath of the medication, expecting to pretty much immediately feel relief. But she didn't. The inhaler wasn't working. Jodie again pressed down the inhaler harder this time and took a bigger breath in, hoping that a bit more medication might do the trick. But again, it just was not working. And so now with panic rising inside of her, as she's, still struggling to breathe, her son is still freaking out and she can't tend to him. And all she was thinking is, I have to get my nebulizer, which is basically a more robust version of an inhaler. It provides more medication more quickly into your body. However, the nebulizer, which was just over in her closet, required some setup. And she knew she felt so frantic right now and she was shaking so much that she didn't think she'd be able to set it up or even set it up in time before she passed out. Just then, her fiance walked into the bedroom, drawn there by the sound of their son crying. But the second he walked in, his attention was not on their son, it was instead on Jodie, who by now was clutching the bed and kind of hobbled over and very clearly having some sort of medical emergency. Jodie turned to him and began to say, I can't breathe. But her fiance already knew she had asthma. He knew what these attacks looked like. And so without even needing to be told, he rushed to the closet, set up her nebulizer, and then put the mask right over her face. And as soon as it was, Jodie took in the biggest inhale she possibly could, really believing this was going to stop the asthma attack. But just like the inhaler, the nebulizer didn't work. It felt like with every breath she was taking, her lungs were shrinking, not expanding. And so Jody turned to her fiance and croaked out, "Call an ambulance," her voice barely audible. And so her fiance, who also was now beginning to panic, grabbed the phone, and as he was talking to the dispatcher, trying to relay all the details of what was happening, outside this thunderstorm was only getting worse and worse. The hail and the rain were battering the sides of the house, and all the windows were shaking. I mean, it was absolute bedlam inside of this house. The next few minutes were torture for Jody. She laid on the bed waiting for paramedics. Her breaths at this point were so small, so shallow, like she knew she was about to pass out any second. And then finally the paramedics rushed inside. She knew there were 2 people in the room, but it was so chaotic. And all she could say when they showed up in the room was, "I'm going to die, I'm going to die." The paramedics lifted her off the bed, they put her on the gurney, and as they wheeled her out the door towards the ambulance, her world went totally black. We're all looking for a fresh start this time of the year, whether it's trying to eat better or lose weight. We all have some bad habits we're trying to stop and some good habits we're trying to start.
Fair play to
make
him.
this the year.
Right. Pretty it's a bonkers situation.
I know, yeah.
Popping an ad in there, isn't it? It's crazy work. Setting it all up again. All right.
Advert straight in the middle.
This is very so it's storytelling, I assume. This is the structure of the channel.
Yeah.
But it's very old school YouTube,
a lot of the time with the stuff we've done, I think a lot of them were like military ones where they had
Mm-hmm.
footage and stuff like that. So, but you'd be doing like the voice over it about telling the
narration,
story sort of thing. I'm guessing with one like this, there's not so much, there's no footage to actually show as you're doing it sort of thing, and really sort of like loud banging music on the on all the military ones as well. With the drums and bass and stuff like that. But yeah, it's bit different than what we've done before from him. But
is it normally?
Normally it's more like normally you get sort of pictures and stuff like that as well.
Right,
but it is him telling the story though over
a
it.
few more layers to it. They're like
I guess
visually.
so. I guess so. Yeah.
But to be fair, I do appreciate that as a skill of being able to build atmosphere and tension just through like a bit of music.
I was definitely do because when it broke to the advert, and I was like,
what?
Carry on.
She did. Yeah, it's interesting.
I just don't know where it's going to go. This, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get straight.
I really
back
don't
into
know. Yeah.
The paramedics rushed Jody to Sunshine Hospital, and on the way, they tried to stabilize her by squeezing these oxygen bags, forcing oxygen into Jody's lungs. And as they were doing that, Jody's fiance was following the ambulance right behind, white-knuckling the steering wheel, praying his fiance was going to survive this asthma attack. When the ambulance finally arrived at Sunshine Hospital, the emergency room was mayhem. Paramedics quickly wheeled Jody in on her gurney, shouting out her vital signs to the doctors waiting near the door. Her fiance, meanwhile, watched helplessly as the medical staff surrounded her and inserted IV lines, hooked up monitors, and began intubating her to force even more oxygen into her lungs. But fortunately, this rapid medical intervention, once Jody got to the hospital, appeared to work, because not long after getting there, Jody did begin to stabilize, not enough to suggest that she was actually all better, but her condition basically began to improve. However, the moment she began to improve, instead of the medical team, talking to her and figuring out what happened and making sure she really was on a path to recovery here, instead, the medical team literally ran out of her room, back out to the front of the ER, because by this point, the Sunshine Hospital ER was overflowing with patients. There were all these people in the waiting room and also outside, and basically everybody had the same symptoms as Jody. They couldn't breathe. There were people slumped on the ground against the wall, screaming for help. I mean, the medical team was totally overwhelmed. And on top of that, there were ambulances literally lined up around the block waiting to drop off patients. There just wasn't any more space. But nonetheless, doctors and nurses and the medical team at the hospital worked furiously, moving from one patient to the next, sometimes in an exam room, sometimes out in the waiting room, sometimes outside. It's wherever the patients were. But the weird thing is all these people, they had the same symptoms, these severe asthma attacks, yet many of the people that were showing up had never had asthma in their lives before. So how was this happening? This went on for hours and hours. And really, the situation in the hospital only continued to get worse, with more and more and more patients showing up with worse and worse symptoms. And so during this madness, Jody, who really hadn't gotten better, she just stabilized, she actually was moved out of the emergency room and over to the ICU, pretty much just to create one more space for new patients. And so in the ICU, Jody's fiance sat next to her, gripping her hand, listening to the sound of the monitors beeping steadily all around her. Outside the room, he could see doctors and nurses and medical staff sprinting up and down the hallways, looking frantic and worried. He had no idea what was happening here. He just hoped Jody would be okay. But it would turn out there actually was someone who knew exactly what was going on. A university researcher named Philip Taylor had actually predicted this the day before. Professor Taylor was an expert in atmospheric allergens, a field so niche that barely anybody outside of his small research circle had even heard of it. And so on the afternoon of November 20th, the day before, Taylor had been at home in his office analyzing data when he noticed something very alarming. All of the ingredients for a catastrophic event were aligning in the forecast, and the patterns were so precise that it stopped him cold. Taylor was stunned. He'd spent years studying the effects of weather on public health, but he'd never seen anything like this before. And at the same time, Taylor also realized that as alarming as this was, very few other people, if anybody, would see this as a problem. He was like the one person in the world that had the expertise to see how catastrophic this might actually be. And so, desperate to warn others, he wound up posting a very urgent announcement on this weather website that he managed. But unfortunately, it just wasn't seen by enough people in time. And so now, as hospitals all across Melbourne overflowed with people gasping for air, Taylor sat in his backyard watching the storm unfold. The sky was pitch black, rain and hail was coming down, the wind was whipping, and off in the distance, all he could hear was thunder and sirens. And he knew, unfortunately, his prediction had been right. Just like Professor Taylor's weather models had predicted, on November 21st, 2016, Melbourne, Australia was hit by an extremely rare event known as thunderstorm asthma. This deadly phenomenon can only occur when three very specific weather conditions align. 1, high heat during the day. 2, a very powerful thunderstorm. And 3, extremely high pollen levels. Melbourne's heat that day had caused unusually high concentrations of ryegrass pollen to hang in the air. And then when that huge thunderstorm rolled in, the intense humidity, the wind, and the rain shattered the pollen grains into microscopic fragments. And then these tiny particles, which were way smaller than regular pollen, were carried by this storm deep into people's homes and into their lungs. Unlike normal pollen, these microscopic fragments bypassed the body's typical defenses and embedded themselves deep into people's lungs, causing severe and sudden asthma attacks. Now, for people who already had asthma, this was catastrophic. But even perfectly healthy people found themselves gasping for air, overwhelmed by the sheer density of this microscopic pollen. The storm had essentially made the air everybody in Melbourne was breathing deadly. As for Jody Santoro, she would spend days in the ICU, hooked up to monitors, with machines pumping oxygen into her lungs, while her body fought to heal. But she was lucky. She would eventually recover. And in the days that followed, she would learn the full scale of what actually happened in Melbourne. Nearly 10,000 people had flooded the hospitals across Australia, complaining of the same symptoms that Jody did. And unfortunately, of those 10,000, 10 people actually lost their lives. And many of them were totally healthy and had never had an asthma attack in their lives before. For Jody, despite surviving this ordeal, the awful memory of what happened on that night will forever be on her mind. She is now all too aware of how fragile life can be and how quickly things can change.
Wow.
I'm going to play you a clip from my other podcast.
No.
I've never heard of that before.
I've never heard of that in my life.
Absolutely crazy, that is.
It's
unbelievable.
You'll never fully understand nature, will you? In terms of like just certain things can like formaldehyde into something else, and then creates this sort of like chemical reaction in everyone.
He was obviously like an expert in the field. This guy, not the scientist sort of thing. You think there'd be a pathway for him to be able to get in touch with like weather forecasters or the news sort of casters to say, listen, I think this is what's going to happen tomorrow. But clearly, he wasn't able to do that for some reason. Put him on his own website, but obviously, clearly there's clearly limited reach and limited access to it, wasn't there?
Because it's such a niche subject.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So you think, because it's such a, if it does happen, I mean, it's such a big thing that you'd think that the weather forecasters, even the general ones, would be sort of aware of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That they might not be experts on it, but at least they might have a feeling that something like that could happen. Yeah. But it's absolutely incredible.
This could be like a film. Like, It's just how it's just like random.
It's like a horror film with like why all these people, like 10,000 people rushed into like hospitals and ER rooms, you know, just
perfectly healthy people,
all with the same symptoms. And you think, at first I was thinking it'd be like some sort of chemical leak, something like that.
I think
maybe
like a gas attack, something like that.
Yeah. I thought you'd think that'd be the most obvious thing, but for it to be an actual natural phenomena,
that only one man knew. That's so theatrical and it's so cinematic. It's like the shadowy figure walks in and it can solve it all. It's absolutely bonkers.
You bet. I mean, people or places in Australia with the same sort of weather patterns or potential weather patterns. I'm sure they're probably all over it now, aren't they? Absolutely all over it. But absolutely incredible story.
Yeah, which I'm surprised I've never heard of it, because 10 people died, which is it's weird, because when it's not in the UK, you don't hear about a low count like that. Like if you hear about America, it's normally about like a shooting or something like that, just like an attack. But nature just going bang.
I mean, imagine if it happened in somewhere like London or Manchester or something like that. In the next week or so, and like 10 people died, it'd be it'd be like huge news, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm sure it was in Australia, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it would be an absolutely huge thing, you know, for people dying sort of like.
It's just nature. It's just pure nature.
Yeah.
Well, it'll never happen here because, one, you've got to have high heat.
Well, yeah. I mean,
we're fine.
We've got the rain, we've got thunderstorms, haven't we? But I mean, you know.
Missing that one key
the
piece.
high heat, that's what we're missing. But I'd never heard of that phenomenon at all before.
It's very interesting.
Just
so interesting.
Not aware of it, but what a story. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, but he's a great storyteller, Mr. Ball.
Absolutely, yeah.
It really is.
He looks like an everyday guy.
Very
relaxed and casual person.
But great story though.
I bet there's millions of stories like that though. Just like
I'm sure there is. Yeah,
but
like I say, it's probably big in Melbourne, but in Australia, but maybe not all around the world, maybe. But there's probably, like I say, things like that from all over the world, isn't there? So,
you met an Australian man and he told you, just go, what?
Yeah, you think,
what are you on about? Yeah,
you would think, is he telling the truth here?
So what people who had asthma attacks died of asthma. Well, there you go, nice one. But then, no, it's actually the world. It's just gone. Mate,
I know,
straight to hospital. But yeah, absolutely crazy. Really entertaining though. Really good video.
Yeah, excellent.
From Mr. Bolin.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.